Good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited today to be hosting our next installment of the Raising Special Kids Facebook Live, here with families, here for families. My name is Brittany Miller, and I have two really special guests that I'm going to introduce you to in a few minutes, joining us today for this unique and exciting Facebook Live. Sorry about that. I am definitely excited. Again, for those joining in, my name is Brittany Miller, and I'm with Raising Special Kids, and I'm thrilled today to be hosting this week's installment of Facebook Live. We have two incredible guests with us who I'll introduce in a few minutes, and we are going to be having a great discussion today surrounding special education in Arizona right now. So thank you again for hopping on today. It's been an exciting week for special education. There's been a lot going on in our country and in our state, and families are adapting, and we're weeks into really jumping into online learning, and our kids are figuring it out, and our school teams are helping support them do that, which is really exciting. As many of you are aware, Secretary DeVos made the decision not to recommend any waivers to IDEA, our special education laws. So that is something that we are definitely thankful for as parents of children with disabilities who receive special education services. We are grateful that there's still those IDEA protections there, even in this time of school closures and distance learning. And I know a lot of that good work was helped by parents advocating, speaking to their representatives and disability advocates in the community. So we are very excited about that. Raising Special Kids, we had our first speaker series event on Tuesday. Attorney Jennifer Kupacheski, she took her time and spoke with families on all kinds of legal subjects. So guardianship, power of attorney, a living will, what to do if you get sick, all of those things that we need to be aware of, especially in a time of crisis. And so that was a great opportunity. Don't worry if you haven't watched it yet. I will be posting it several more times to our Facebook timeline. It's definitely worth the watch. So without further ado, I'm going to get into what you've all been waiting for, our discussion today with Lori Bird and Angela Odom from the Department of Education. A little bit about both of them. Lori is the Chief of Dispute Resolution for the Department of Ed, Dispute Resolution Unit. Before she had this position, she was an attorney for many years, representing parents in special education, as well as other disability-related issues. So she has a lot of experience. She is born in Boston, but lived in Arizona for a long time. So she has been here for 24 years. She has 3 grown children who have left the nest. But according to Lori, some of them are home doing college distance learning right now. And so that leaves her time to spoil her dog. Lori shared that education is something I am passionate about, and I'm happy to share what I can to help keep the focus on student services. So thank you so much, Lori, for taking your time today. I know you're probably very busy right now, and we appreciate you. Angela Odom, she is the Director of Program Support and Monitoring for Arizona's Exceptional Student Services Department. She has had 20 plus years in education. She's had experience as a classroom science teacher, working with at-risk youth. She served as a special education teacher. She was a building level administrator, so an assistant principal. She also served as a special education director in a charter school organization. Angela is from Wisconsin, but she says she's as close to an Arizona native as it gets. She has 2 children and 1 in college, and her son is actually 7 and doing distance learning at home. So she knows what it's like. She knows what we're going through. She's in the trenches with us. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining us. We are very excited today. So to kick things off, I have gathered some questions, some, hearing from families what they're concerned about in regards to, special education and what that looks like for their children, and how, to move forward from this, and how to ask for different services, and also, things my coworkers have been hearing from families. So I compiled it all, ladies, and I wanted to ask you some questions. And so the first one to start off is, with all the changes, surrounding COVID-19 and the pandemic and how it affects our Arizona children with disabilities, what are some of the behind-the-scenes projects and action plans the Department of Ed has been working on to support special education in the school districts?
So thank you so much for that warm welcome, Brittany. That was super nice, and we're very happy to be here. I can speak on behalf of our Exceptional Student Services Unit, and also in terms of the entire agency, we are open for business. So just a reminder to folks that we are here, we are working, we may be working in different locations, but we are here to work with constituents and offer all the services that we would normally offer in a regular time. Out of our ESS unit, we quickly went into action, put together a COVID-19 website, which has a lot of really good information. And for anyone who wants to look at it, it has resources that families can access as well as educators. And there's also large Q&A documents that are organized by category. Again, maybe not in the most parent-friendly language, but it's definitely a great place to start and get some information. Along with that, we've been doing weekly director check-ins with the special education directors to try to make sure that we're giving them the most up-to-date information, supporting them with different topics that they're all grappling with right now to try to make sure that they are able to provide those services to students. We also have PD resources that are going out of our unit, and I think those are happening weekly or maybe even more regularly than that. There's some organized and some less organized through office hours, and that's going directly to teachers in classrooms in terms of how to get started with virtual learning, and then the nitty-gritty of, you know, what does the specially designed instruction, or how do I implement the IEP. We've also provided some resources out of Lori's area regarding some virtual meeting strategies and things of that nature. So I can let her kind of talk about some of that as well.
That would be great. Lori, did you want to share? I think you're still on mute.
Yeah.
Technology.
No worries.
Yes, we have taken our FIEP process, and we did a webinar on how to utilize those strategies to run an effective virtual meeting. We are doing virtual mediations, which has required our mediators to really come up to speed on how to use a variety of technologies so that we can still serve people using mediation. We've been doing an awful lot of collaboration. I think the agency has really been doing a lot of cross-unit collaboration to make sure we hit on all topics. Although our actual complaint numbers are down, which is a good thing. It means that people are communicating. It means that people are, assuming best intentions and attempting to work together. My investigators have been doing a lot of research, reaching out to other states, staying on top of the ever-changing federal scene, and then trying to help work that information into what Exceptional Student Services is doing. You can call us and ask questions from dispute resolution. If you get the voicemail, we now have the technology that sends all my voicemails to my email, and you will get a call back from someone that can help address your question.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Angela, too, for sharing all the good work you guys have been up to. And for those listening in, just for some of the acronyms, so PD means professional development. So they're giving a lot of tools to try to support our educators and then in turn helping our children. And then also the FIEP is a facilitated IEP. It's a service through dispute resolution you can request. I just wanted to clarify those two acronyms because sometimes, parents, those are new terms. And so I also will, in a little bit, I will look up the dispute resolution information and I'll post it in the chat. For people viewing, you'll notice I'm glancing over. I am watching the chat right now, and so I'm seeing some questions pop up. So when there's an appropriate moment, ladies, if you're okay with it, I'll read some of the questions to you. Let's get a little farther along as we go. But feel free, if you have a question for any of our viewers, please ask it. If we don't get to it today, one of our family support specialists from Raising Special Kids will contact you and will help you with that. So moving forward, so you guys have really had been working closely with Raising Special Kids lately, and I know that's been such a wonderful opportunity for our organization. We call it the Education Stat Team. So my colleagues that have been collaborating and working with you, providing feedback from what our families are hearing, and in turn giving it to the Department of Ed, has been a good experience for us. So how's it been for you? Have you enjoyed this? What are some of the things you've done together?
Thank you, Brittany, and thank you for the reminder on our jargon. We often forget to not speak in acronyms because that's what we do every day. So I appreciate you reminding us because I forget all the time and I try really hard. So it's been wonderful. It's been great to have the feedback from families to understand where maybe we have holes in some of our guidance and how we can beef those things up. And to hear the feedback in terms of, where the families are struggling to help us kind of see where maybe teachers and special education directors are potentially struggling to kind of fill in that gap. So it's been great to have the information from the field from both perspectives so that we can try to make sure that we're reaching everybody's needs.
Great. Laura, did you have any comment on that?
I just want to say that seems like this is one of the silver linings, if we have to look for silver linings in this whole thing, is we're really getting the opportunity to talk with and collaborate with people that we don't normally get to spend a lot of time with. And I think it's the opportunity to really hear from Raising Special Kids, what their experience, so that can inform our practice. The Department of Ed doesn't just serve school districts. The Department of Ed serves students. And a lot of our focus may be in providing that professional development or providing the compliance side. But the bottom line is we're all doing the same thing and we all want the same thing. We all want our students, and particularly our most vulnerable students, those with disabilities, to be successful. And I think the silver lining is, and I'm hoping it will last, is that we have more opportunity to really collaborate and to drill down to that student-focused place.
Thank you both. I know as an employee and a family support specialist, I've really found our stat team's guidance from you passed on to us and our team very valuable. As I'm talking with parents, being able to give them reassurance and guidance from you so we know how best to support them in their time, this time that's stressful for many families. I'm just going to glance over at our questions really quick. So one that came up, and either of you, feel free to jump in with if you'd like to answer. How do you determine if your child on an IEP is getting equal access to what the general education students are learning? So do you have any feedback on that?
So I'll start and then I'll let Lori chime in. I see she unmuted herself. So that's a tough one because we have in Arizona, House Bill 2910 was the House bill that went into effect to kind of cover this emergency situation in the school setting. And it didn't outline what schools, it outlined very, very broadly what schools needed to put into place. And so every school is kind of doing something a little bit different. I know I personally have talked with my friend who lives down the street, who's a teacher in a different district than my child. And I've also talked with friends who have children in other districts, and we're all of our experiences are very different. So it's really hard to know because everybody's doing something a little bit different. I don't know, Lori, if you have more to add to that, you might have a different, some more pieces of nuggets than I do.
Right. Well, and here's something that sometimes, so Angela and I, although we work very closely together, and we both look at how the IDEA is implemented and making sure that our public schools are implementing the IDEA to serve students. Sometimes we look at it through a little different lens. So when I heard that question, the first thing that I thought about was you look at the IEP and think about when your student was at the brick and mortar campus. When they were in that general education classroom, because equal access is talking about access to those learning opportunities, not necessarily to the SDI, that specially designed instruction that your student's going to receive. So think about what is it that is being offered to all kids? Is that coming through, and has the school contacted you to let you know how your child can participate in that learning? Are they following the accommodations and modifications in the IEP that even when your child is on the campus, they need to make that learning accessible, meaning they can learn as with their peers just the same. So you really just want to know, are they being, and I hesitate to use the word included because that's a loaded word,
Right.
but are they being given the opportunity to participate in all of the same educational opportunities? And again, like Angela said, they're all over the place. Some districts are only offering enrichment. Some rural districts are only offering paper packets. Some districts are all an online platform, and the high school students are moving on for grades. Whatever your district is providing, is your student included in that provision? And if there are general education opportunities, are the accommodations that your student might be entitled to being given to them in the virtual or the paper packet format? And talk to your principal, call your school principal. That's the place to start. Call the teacher. If you haven't heard from your school, and you should have, then you need to say, hey, we're here. We've had, maybe your student just got missed for some clerical reason, right? We're here. We want to participate. Show us how we can do that.
Thank you. And I know our family support team, we've been really coaching parents, communicate with your team. Let the teacher know how your child's doing. If you need to, talk to the principal, but they need to know these things to better support your child. And thank you for, providing both of your guidance on that. Let's move on. Some of it we've kind of already touched on in these questions, but what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the IEP process because of the school closures? And how is the Arizona Department of Education overcoming those hurdles?
So, as you alluded to, there have been no waivers of IDEA. So when you talk about changes in the IEP process, what you're talking about is, what does the IDEA say has to happen, and what does the implementing regulations from the state of Arizona say? How do we implement the IDEA? The short answer is nothing's changed. IEPs that are annual reviews that are scheduled to happen should be going forward in a virtual format. And we have provided some professional development to the field to help them do that effectively. Maybe it's a phone call, maybe they don't have a Zoom meeting. I mean, there's any number of ways you can do an annual review. And any number of agreements, in fact, that parents and districts can come to in reviewing that IEP and then making the necessary revisions. When it comes to requesting an IEP outside of that annual review, you can still request an IEP. What you need to know, though, is, and again, what the law is and what happens sometimes is different. You can request an IEP, but the school has to hold that IEP based on our state board regulations within 45 school days of receiving the request. Well, we're not counting school days right now. So some districts may say, yes, we agree that we need to hold an IEP meeting, and as soon as we get back to counting school days again, we'll get that on the books within the 45 days. Other districts might say, you know what, we're really good at this virtual IEP stuff, and we can do it, and we'll schedule a virtual IEP outside of that annual time. So from a legal perspective, nothing's changed. but the format's changed, and the time to get your questions answered may be a little longer because people are available in different ways than they were previously.
Right. Did you have any feedback on that, Angela?
I would just echo, that's really the message we've been trying to send, especially when we have those special education director check-ins, is that, there hasn't been a change to the law. So, things are how they are. We need to get creative, and we need to really rely on that communication. We've been stressing as much as we can, communicate, so that families don't feel left out and they feel informed, at least about what's going on and what they should expect. So that's kind of been definitely an area of focus for sure.
Thank you. And I will say we've been hearing from families that they have been having virtual IEP meetings and they've been successful. So it is happening. And I think everyone's just trying their best to adapt, which is great. So this question you kind of answered as well. I feel like a lot of our questions kind of really have a smooth transition with each other. But what processes remain the same? I know, let's talk about evaluations a little bit, because this is a question we've been getting a lot at Raising Special Kids. So can you share some guidance? So if a child, for instance, say my child, I suspected they had a disability and I needed to request an educational evaluation, what would that look like? Because I know some of those evaluations normally would be in person.
So one thing that's important to note is in legal terms, the term evaluation is used in terms of the evaluation process as a whole, which is that first meeting where you're going to talk about, how things are going, what information we have about the student, and then decide whether we need to collect additional information or not in order to determine whether the child's eligible. So sometimes, and the reason I want to make the distinction is sometimes there's confusion around evaluation versus assessment. So again, nothing has changed. So the timelines are the timelines. So if your student's already in special education, those 3-year timelines for those reevaluations are still intact. And because we know that some of the assessment protocols, meaning some of the testing that needs to be done, may not lend itself to a virtual environment, or they may not be allowable in a virtual environment. We're strongly encouraging that for reevaluations, that the team really look at the information they already have for that student to try to make an informed decision to move forward. Hopefully without some assessment data. That doesn't mean that they can't go back next year when we're back in session and request some new assessment data or anything along those lines. For a student who is not in special education, if a request is made during this closure, like Lori already discussed with the IEP timeline, the response time frame for the school to respond is in school days. And because, again, we're not counting school days right now, the obligation isn't that they meet right away. That, again, like Lori said, that's not to say that they won't, because if they're doing a great job with virtual meetings and they feel like they have a lot of really robust information around your child, and or you as the parent have a lot of information to bring forward to the team, potentially they may go ahead and meet and do a virtual meeting and progress that process forward. But it's going to really depend on the situation, because again, it's the mandated time frame is in school days, and because we're not counting school days right now, it may get put on hold until the start of the school year.
It sounds like a very individual situation, just like our IEPs are.
Yes.
I had a pertinent question that popped up, if either of you wanted to ask it. So what if your child was in the middle of the evaluation process and then this happened? Can they finish up virtually? And it sounds like maybe, but it might be more of an individual team decision for that child, right?
Well, remember, if they're in the middle of an evaluation process, let's back up and dispel a little bit of a myth, because I still see it happening where the letter comes in to the school district saying, let this email serve as my consent for evaluation. Well, that doesn't start the 60-day evaluation timeline. that happens after you've been completely informed about the additional assessments, tests that your child is going to be undergoing, and that prior written notice is issued letting you know this is what the district intends to do, and then you consent, and that's what starts the 60-day timeline. So that timeline is intact. So if you're in the middle of that timeline, the district is going to go ahead with that evaluation. Like Angela referenced, you're going to have to defer to your psychologist as to what assessment can be completed virtually, whether they might need to switch an assessment or swap out one for another one that can be completed virtually, whether it really is a measure. Let's say it's an assessment of academic skills that your special education teacher is doing. Are you really getting that student's best performance if you're doing it virtually? You have to consider all of those things, but the school really is charged with somehow completing that evaluation within the 60-day timeline. If they can't complete that evaluation and they can't get to, yes, the child is eligible for special education services, or no, they're not eligible for special education services, then after they are able to finish the full evaluation, there may be some compensatory education that can be discussed between the parent and the school. It doesn't mean that they will be owed compensatory education, but that's kind of the, I don't want to say penalty because that's not the right word. That's the consequence.
Remedy.
Huh?
Remedy?
That's the remedy, the equitable remedy for not meeting an evaluation timeline if it somehow results in a student deficit.
I know, thank you both. I know that parents that I've been speaking with, and I know my colleagues as well, we've just been really encouraging them to, take notes on their child's progress. If they're worried about where they're at, write things down, collect some data. So that way, when you, again, have the opportunity to meet, whether it be virtually or in person with the IEP team, they'll get a clear picture about where your child's at. So thank you both. Moving on, this is actually a great transition to this next question as well. So we've been hearing from families, they're afraid of their child regressing. Their child may not respond well to virtual learning, which many of our kids with disabilities don't. I know personally, my daughter who has disabilities, it's been a difficult change, but we're trying our best. Or if their child, maybe they had a one-on-one paraprofessional that helped them all the time at school. And so now that for whatever reason, they're not getting that service and their child is having a hard time, or, maybe teletherapy isn't working or it hasn't been set up yet. What advice would you offer to those families, and how would it be best for those parents to efficiently communicate those concerns to their school team?
So the best recommendation, and this is what we, when we get phone calls from parents, we often will tell them, we kind of work through that chain of command. We often will talk with parents and say, have you talked to the classroom teacher? Start there. If you're not getting a response there, then escalate up the chain, meaning let's talk to the school principal. If the school principal isn't responsive, then let's go to the district or the charter school's special education director. We do have program specialists out of the unit that I supervise that are assigned to every single charter school and school district in the state. And that's public information. So you can go on our website and find out who's assigned to your school, and they can also be a point of contact to help you as well. We would certainly refer parents and families over to you guys at RSK, because a lot of times you can help advocate in a way that we're not able to. We're able to give the legal standing, the background in law, but we're not able to actually help really provide all of those suggestions on the best way to move forward. So those are kinds of some of the things that we usually work with parents in terms of how to work through those problems.
Thank you. Yeah, that was wonderful. Laura, did you have a comment on that as well?
The only comment, Brittany, I actually have is what you said prompted me when you said the word advice. It jogged in my memory that I have to tell all of you
Oh, yes.
that although I am an attorney, I am not your attorney in this situation. And therefore, anything I say is not legal advice that is given towards any specific situation that you may be encountering. It's just general legal background and advice. And that seems like common sense, but the State Bar of Arizona prefers that I give that disclaimer whenever I speak because I'm a member of the bar. So now that we have that out of the way, which I should have done at the very beginning.
It's okay.
The only thing that I would add to what Angela said is there is going to be an impact from this for every child, whether they're a student with a disability or whether they're not a student with a disability. What that impact is going to be different for every single child. And it is anticipated even from our Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, that there may be regression, that this virtual learning platform or this packet, or even if the school is doing everything they can, that there are some students for whom this simply isn't a FAPE. This simply isn't a free and appropriate public education. And what that impact will be, schools are going to be asked to determine that at the earliest opportunity that they can, be that fourth quarter progress reports, be that over the summer if we're allowed to be in a little closer contact, or be that when school resumes. And we've interpreted, as the state of Arizona, that that is an obligation that the school will have to assess whether or not a child on an IEP needs some compensatory services. Now, that doesn't mean you get your every minute for minute and you missed 3 hours of math instruction, so we're going to plug in 3 extra hours of math instruction. What you're going to do is the school's going to look at all the data. They're going to gather that parental input that everyone's now keeping, Brittany, because you alerted them to how important that is. And they're going to make an offer if they don't feel like that kind of the makeup that every child's going to get won't be enough, that won't put that child back on track, that won't address the regression that happened due to the school closure. And so there's a recognition that there may need to be some additional service. It's an equitable remedy. It can be creative. It doesn't have to be onerous. I mean, we certainly don't want to make kids work from dawn to dusk because they were impacted by the closure. But there is a recognition that there are kids that are going to need compensatory educational services. And we just had a webinar directed to state special education directors. And there's actually that presentation on our COVID-19 website, although it's not narrated, all of the slides are there.
Great. And I actually, for those watching, I did post the Arizona Department of Education website with the COVID-19 guidelines. So check in our thread because it's there. I have a few comments that will lead us really well into our next question. A parent did say she agreed that the general expectation should be that there may be significant regression in many students, and she thanked you both for recognizing that. We had another question in regards to grades. So if distance learning is difficult for a child, and because of this new platform on how they're learning, and the school is providing these meaningful learning opportunities, and it includes grading them, what happens for that student? This mom is concerned that he started out with decent grades, but because we've gone to distance learning, now he's really struggling and is having bad grades. So what advice would you give that mother, I guess, is what I'm asking. To either of you.
So I'll start out, and then Lori, feel free to jump in. Again, I would say communication is key. And if you're actually in a place where you're getting grades, I think you're kind of out of the norm, I'll be honest, from what I've heard anyways. So I would definitely be communicating with the school and trying to make sure that, like Lori said earlier, when implementation of the IEP in terms of accommodations and how is the student accessing the curriculum, are there accommodations being made to the virtual learning environment that are somewhat in line with the IEP? So those are the kinds of things that you would want to definitely take a look at, and then also certainly talk with the teacher and the IEP team to understand what the expectation is. Because I don't know that there's any, and Lori, I'm probably treading on shaky ground here. I don't know that there's anything in the House bill that requires assigning grades unless it's a graduating senior. I know there were some allowances around graduation. So certainly, I would definitely check in with the district, the school, and see, what their expectation is in terms of assigning grades and how they expect that to work for all kids, because obviously, even though your child may have an IEP, that virtual learning may not be working for other kids who don't have IEPs too, and their grades may be slipping. So I don't think it may not be unique just to your child or to the fact that your child has an IEP. So I would definitely check in and make sure that you're understanding correctly what the expectation is, and what the grade assignment is actually doing for your child as well, because maybe even though they're assigning a grade, maybe it isn't really going to count. I know my older child is in college and they're getting pass-fail grades, so they're not actually getting letter grades even in college. So I think there's some miscommunication maybe that might be happening too. I would definitely make sure you understand that they are actually getting a grade and what that means moving forward.
And the only thing I would add to that is the reason you heard that kind of hesitancy from Angela and I is because grading is really, Arizona is what's known as a local control state. So we, as the State Board of Education, or a unit of the State Board of Education, don't really get into all of the ins and outs and details of how a school goes about meeting the requirements that have been set. There's a lot of freedom to do that. So when you start talking grades, that's more of a gen ed, that's an all student, that is a local control issue. If a complaint would come in, for example, to dispute resolution that said nothing more than, hey, the school went to a virtual learning format and my students' grades dropped, I would have to tell them I can't investigate that. It doesn't fall under the IDEA,
Okay.
Which is all. So, and I'm probably going beyond the scope of your question, but let's be kind to ourselves and be kind to our kids. And let's put grading in perspective. This is 1/4 of grading. In the end, I think you really need, if your kid is trying and the teacher is trying, does it really matter? Now, again, I know that there are situations where it's a high school student and they have their sights set on some universities. But here's the other thing. Everybody knows what's happening right now, and it's not just happening to your kid. And so grades may not be the place where you want to focus a lot of time and energy. And that's just an opinion. And everybody is allowed to make decisions and have opinions based on their own child. But I can't echo Angela's comments any stronger than communicate, because the teachers out there are really trying.
Right.
And this isn't a vacation for them, and they want students to succeed. And maybe don't phrase it just as how can my child get a B instead of a C or a B instead of an A, but phrase it as how can I help my child learn this content that they're going to need to be successful next year when things return to whatever normal looks like.
Thank you. I know as a mother, I'm going to take that advice you just gave to heart too, because I have a high schooler, and I know a lot of our high school students probably, have more work on their plates versus elementary students. And you're right, the world is all experiencing COVID-19 together. And so we're all going to adapt together and we're all going to catch up together somehow. So thank you for that. So obviously, this is a good point to mention that if you have individual questions, because I see some popping up and we're not going to be able to get to everyone because these ladies, their time is valuable, please contact Raising Special Kids. We have put our referral form in the comments on our Facebook thread, and our phone number is 602-242-4366. We can connect you with our family support team, and we can help you with all of your individual concerns and coach you on, how to take those next steps and how to communicate with the school. So we are definitely here for you. So don't forget that, families that are listening in. So are there options for families to provide direct feedback? If I wanted to call, the Department of Ed directly and provide what I thought, my opinion on distance learning or how it was going, how would families get in contact with you to do that?
So we have an ESS inbox, and I believe that's just ESS inbox, INBOX, at azed.gov. So they can certainly send any special education related questions directly to that inbox. And we do have a great staff that routes that to the right people, make sure that we've got the right folks addressing the question. The other thing is we do have, again, for ESS, we have what's called a consultant of the day. So if you just want to talk to somebody general, not necessarily somebody who may have some knowledge about the school that you're calling in reference to, that number is 602-542-4013. Did you get it, Brittany?
Yes, thank you. I've got the phone number. Can you say the email one more time and I will type it in the comments?
Yep.
Okay.
ESSINBOX at azed.gov.
Great. I will type that in just a minute for those listening. So thank you.
You're welcome. I was just going to say, those are our ESS main lines. And I know Lori can give you the plug for her dispute resolution line. In addition to that, if it's a more general question, like, virtual learning isn't working for my kid kind of thing, that could go to our constituent services. Unfortunately, I don't know their information off the top of my head, but that would be one that you could certainly reach out to, and they answer questions and route them to the right folks as well.
Thank you. So on that note, so Lori, obviously as a last resort, of course, we really encourage families to communicate with their school team, to call us if there's problems and we'll try to help. But if the family is in a position where they want to pursue dispute resolution, are the options still in place, and what may that look like?
All of our options for dispute resolution are in place and all of our timelines remain. I would encourage families to start, because this is such an unusual situation, with maybe mediation. We have some wonderful mediators at no cost to either party that can help bridge the gap in a disagreement between a school and parents. And if you use mediation, you're not giving up any of your other rights. If you have more of a procedural, you like your IEP, but it's not being implemented correctly. You're not getting the specially designed instruction, the accommodations, whatever. Yes, absolutely, you may file a state complaint. What you need to know about a state complaint, though, is it's the statutory mechanism by which we, as the State Department of Ed, are alerted to potential non-compliance. And we will sign it to an investigator as long as it falls under IDEA Part B. But what you need to know under a state complaint is the remedy may not be that your kid or your family gets something directly. The remedy might be that the public educational agency, the school district, is instructed that they have to do something, train staff, reform their policies, hold another IEP meeting. So it's important, and you can call us, and I actually don't know our general number off the top of my head, azed.gov/dispute resolution. We'll give you all our contact information. Because your other option is due process. Due process is, my child has been denied a free and appropriate public education. The school thinks that looks one way, and I believe that it looks another way. And you can file a request for due process. All of those forms are up on that website I just gave you. And then the Office of Administrative Hearings will assign an administrative law judge to essentially settle that dispute in a hearing. It's a much more formal legal process. I believe that they were holding virtual hearings only by telephone, but I just got a hearing notice that one of the ALJs said that they were going to hold an actual in-person hearing. So I'm not sure exactly. And because they have essentially an aggregate of 75 days, it's hard to know whether that hearing would be virtual or whether it would be in person.
Thank you. And I have a question, actually. Is the facilitated IEP an option virtually right now?
No.
Okay.
However, because a facilitated IEP, the way that works, the initial thinking was that it would be far less effective in a virtual environment. As we're learning more about our virtual environments and the tools we can use, if we are still in some kind of closure situation or needing to do virtual FIEP, that will be available starting with the new school year, the 2021 school year. So, but yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I know that's a question. That's when families call us and we've provided the support and they've done their part with the school, there are times where we share that information, and I just want to make sure we're providing the correct
yeah,
info.
right now, just during the time of this closure from March through the end of the school year, we are not offering the FIEP. However, that won't be long-term. And certainly if you want to have a meeting, let's say, right after school starts, we will be available to provide that service. Wonderful.
Thank you. Well, I know that we've been talking about so many important topics that families have been asking us this week. And, as a parent of a child with disability, I've learned so much just listening to both of you. And I really appreciate your candidness and your transparency and just really, wanting to provide us all listening in the information so we can do our best in supporting our kids. So thank you so much. I do have one last question before we wrap up. So are there any words of wisdom or guidance you would like to offer in general to families who are trying to manage their child's special education at home? It has two parts. What are some tips on how they can prepare for when the school year resumes, for when they have the opportunity to meet with their child's IEP team again?
Okay, first of all, we've said it before, we're all in this together. That's kind of the mantra of raising special kids right now. And your kids are going to be okay. So when the school resumes, you've now forged an even better relationship with the people on your child's team, hopefully, even though the communication looks better or looks different. And you're going to go into the school year assuming good intent, assuming that the district wants your child to succeed. You will not always agree on what success looks like, and you will not always agree on how to get there. But let's assume that everybody does want your child to be successful, and you're going to go into the school year with optimism and know that all of your rights and protections remain in place, and that your Department of Ed has tried to provide as many resources to your school, both district and charter, to provide your student with what they need. And when things do break down, dispute resolution in particular is here to help you repair.
Thank you. Angela, do you have any last words of advice to give?
I would just say, be patient with yourself and your child, be kind to yourself and your child. This is a stressful time for everybody right now. And like Lori said, hopefully when you come out of it, you'll have maybe more information about your child, as well as a better relationship and open lines of communication with that team that you can leverage when you are back in school, and can be even a stronger advocate because you have more information.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely think as parents and professionals, we're all just learning new skills. We're learning how to adapt. And I am amazed at how our kids are adapting. Yes, there are some struggles there, but there are also a lot of triumphs. So in closing, I just wanted to shout out one more time, thank you both so much. We are very privileged to have you take the time today to speak, and I was the lucky one that got to do it, so thank you. I know I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our Raising Special Kids families have as well. And for all of the people listening in, I will see you next Friday at 1 p.m. for our Here With Families, Here For Families Facebook Live. And stay tuned for the topic. We're going to come up with a really good one to discuss. So have a great weekend.